Okay, so this video is going to be your ultimate crash course in defining LD terms. When I started LD debate, we didn't really have a team at West. I was one of the first people to do it. So I would go to competitions and people would use these words and I had no idea what they meant. So this is going to help prevent you from experiencing the same thing. So we're going to start very basic with just the stuff that comes in writing your cases. Now, a case is the specific written speech that you will read to defend your side of the argument. It's a constructive case, which means that it's adding evidence to your side and building up your side of the argument. So the first thing in your case will be the resolution or resolved. You could use either term. And that's just that one sentence tagline that you're going to be debating about. In LD debate, as opposed to public forum where they use pro and con, we use affirmative and negative, or AF and neg as they're called for short. And that just means AF is in favor of the resolution and neg is against the resolution. After that is your framework. And framework is the philosophy side of Lincoln-Douglas debate. So if you hear a judge talking about a framework debate or something, that's how well did you address your opponent's philosophy. Now, framework is broken down into two parts. The first of these is a value, which is some universal ideal like freedom or justice or equality, something like that. And then the value criterion is the specific philosophy by someone like John Locke or Immanuel Kant, a specific philosophy that connects back to your value. This is a hard concept to get, so we're definitely going into detail on that in its own video, but for right now, just know that framework means philosophy. Your contentions are your specific arguments that you have to support your side of the case that ultimately tie back to the philosophy framework. So typically an AF case will have around 3 contentions, maybe with some subpoints in there, and a neg case will have 2 contentions. So a contention is, it'll probably take you a minute to read the whole thing. It'll have 2 or 3 sources cited within the contention, and it's all one specific contained argument. So you'll have 2 or 3 specific arguments in your case. So that's what a contention is. It's just contention 1, contention 2, contention 3 are your arguments in the case. So now we're going to focus on some vocab that you'll hear in the rounds. And the first of these is the AC, NC, 1AR, NR, and 2AR. So these are just shorthand terms for the 5 speeches that there are in a round of Lincoln-Douglas debate. The AC is the affirmative constructive case. That's what C stands for, constructive, where they build up their own arguments. The NC is the case where the negative builds up and constructs their own arguments. And then R means rebuttal. So the first affirmative rebuttal or response, the negative response, and the second affirmative response and rebuttal. So those are just the terms that you'll hear to describe specific speeches instead of saying, well, in your third speech, which was the 5th speech of the round, you just hear those terms. Also, when you're in a round, you'll hear cross-X. Cross-examination is what that means. And it's where you or your opponent have a chance to ask the other questions about their case to poke holes in their case. So cross-X is the opportunity for you to kind of get an upper hand on your opponent. Prep time is something you'll have in the round where you have 4 minutes to spread however you want throughout the whole thing, but 4 minutes total to kind of sit down and gather your thoughts, because the AC, NC, your constructive cases, are written ahead of time, but everything else you have to write on the spot. So prep time is used for doing that. So a lot of times in LD, you'll hear people talk about cards, and that's just another name for source. So if you're citing a source, that's a card. And specifically in LD, people cite their cards with the last name of the author and the year it was published. So if I'm using an article published by Dr. Hensey in 2019, it would be, according to the card, Hensey 19. You'll hear a lot of talk about flowing in a round, and this is something else we'll talk about in a later video. But flowing is essentially just note-taking in the round, taking notes of what your opponent is saying so that you can respond to them. but it's a little bit deeper than that. A flow is a diagram that you make and everyone else, the judge, your opponent, makes to show where arguments are. Because in a debate round, a lot of things will be thrown out there, a lot of different statistics and stuff, and some of them you might not even talk about again. So a flow is used to show this person said this, and then their opponent responded, and so on, and shows kind of how the debate evolves over time. So like I said, we'll go into a different video on that later, but just know that it's kind of note-taking and making a diagram of the case. Something else is signposting. And this is something that judges use to refer to you telling the judge and the opponent what you're talking about. So you can just be spurting out arguments all you want, but if the judge doesn't know where to put that on their flow diagram, it might not count. So signposting is saying, now moving on to my first contention, or attacking my opponent's contention to subpoint B. So referring to very specific arguments by name to show kind of what you're talking about in the wider scheme of the debate. It's very important starting out. You'll hear judges say, like, you could do a better job of signposting. And that just means telling the judge what you're talking about. Finally, in round, you'll hear things like voters' issues or crystallization. They mean the same thing. And that's in your last speech, you drop all the other arguments and focus on probably 2 to 4 very specific things about the case, the most important issues that you've discussed. This could be your framework philosophy debate, it could be one specific contention, but whatever it is, it's the biggest issue that you had in the debate, and you're going to explain why you won on that issue. That's why it's called crystallization, is you're making it crystal clear to the judge why on these few key issues you beat your opponent. So that'll be the fundamental part of your last speech. And then we just have a couple of terms that are outside of rounds. Paradigms are something when you arrive at the round, you'll hear people asking, does the judge have any paradigms? And that just means their preferences in the debate. Some judges like you to focus more on the philosophy. Some don't care about the philosophy. Some don't like it if you talk too fast. So it's just asking the judges how they want to see the round conducted. Ballots and critiques are the sheets of paper that the judges will write, or it could be electronic now, where they're going to explain why they voted for who they voted for, explaining their decision, and give you all the feedback and advice that they want to give you to improve your case in the future. And you'll receive all of those after the entire tournament is over. Schematics are just the schedule for the day, showing you where your room is, what side you'll be speaking on, af or neg. Yeah, it's pretty basic. They'll be posted periodically throughout the day because of something called power matching. Now, power matching is when after the first 2 rounds, you start to be paired with someone who has the same record as you. So if you're deep into the day and you've won 3 and lost 1, you'll be paired up against someone who has also won 3 and lost 1. So after the first 2 rounds, you start to be paired against people who have the same skill set as you, which is really helpful. So if you start facing hard people, you know you're doing really well. And finally, you got speaker points, or speaks as they're sometimes called. So in debate, obviously they're focusing on your arguments and how you're effectively responding to your opponent's arguments. But they also give you points based on how well of a speaker you are, just how good you do at talking and presenting yourself. And those will be separate in that they give separate awards. Someone could win the tournament based on their argumentation, but not be that great a speaker, or the other way around. So speaks are something that you'll hear talked about in terms of your presentation. All right, so that's the basics of your Lincoln Douglas dictionary. There's probably going to be some other terms that I've missed, but I think you've got the basics now. So thanks for watching.